Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yishua Hawkins. Well, breaking news out of Israel tonight, Israel is at war. October 7th is a Jewish holiday celebrated by many Israeli citizens, but this year it was the day chosen by Hamas for a surprise attack on Israel. Now, what you're about to see is Israel's response to the attack that left over 1,300 Israeli people dead after that first assault. Please play the video.
Do you know anything about that? What can you report at this stage? All right. Yumna.
Yeah, well, like we've mentioned before, it's sad because it's the civilians, the innocent casualties of war who suffer the most with these leaders making these decisions to strike other territories. Well, what prompted such airstrikes from Israel? Our next video shows rocket launches and Hamas fighters carrying out ground invasions into Israel and how they caught the Israeli army off guard. The tiny nation of Israel is calling October 7th their 9/11 and has catapulted the two peoples into another much more bloody war. We have to warn you that what you're about to see is graphic and disturbing.
We begin tonight with one of America's closest allies attacked and now at war. The scenes this morning across Israel were chaotic, unprecedented, and terrifying. The Palestinian militant group Hamas choosing a Jewish holiday to launch an attack on and into Israel. There was the barrage of rockets into Israel, but also incursions by militants. These were the scenes of Hamas fighters storming across the border, marauding through the streets of Israel. Hamas confirming it has taken an unconfirmed number of hostages, soldiers and civilians dragged from the streets. An Israeli official calling today their 9/11. Israel's response so far has been swift, but only just beginning. They've already leveled entire buildings in Gaza, the territory that's home to Hamas. The death toll is at least 200 people on each side and is expected to rise.
It looks like a scene from Israel's darkest nightmare. A surprise attack beginning with thousands of rockets, followed by waves of heavily armed Palestinian gunmen pouring out of Gaza and onto the streets of cities and towns across southern Israel. The militants taking whole families hostage, marching them barefoot through their own neighborhoods. And then cries of triumph as they spirit their captives back to Gaza. This woman, bloodied, zip-tied, and terrified, struggling as she's forced into the back of a captured Israeli military jeep. And here, the body of an Israeli soldier dragged from the turret of a tank and beaten by the mob. Israel's military tonight confirming there are both civilians and soldiers among the captives. Their exact number is unknown. But the army says all options are on the table, including a full-scale ground invasion of Gaza to bring them home. Israel's prime minister telling his people, citizens of Israel, we are at war, not in an operation, but at war. And every hour, the death toll rising, these civilians killed at a bus stop. And in this kibbutz, victims packed into a small room and executed at point-blank range. The surprise attack led by highly trained fighters from Hamas and Islamic Jihad. blasting their way through the security barrier separating Israel from Gaza, in some places using bulldozers to smash through. This unit fighting into the Erez border crossing, the main terminal between Israel and Gaza. Usually tightly controlled by Israeli troops, the crossing today completely overrun by Palestinian fighters. Israel's military caught badly off guard, surging its forces into the south, fighting street by street across more than 20 locations as it tries to regain control. Israeli jets pounding targets across Gaza. This tower collapsing after a direct strike. And Palestinian hospitals flooded with the dead and wounded, many of them civilians. A war only in its opening hours, and a nightmare the people of the Holy Land can't seem to wake up from.
Katan, if there was any sense of healing the relationships between the Israelis and the Palestinians, that is totally diminished at this point.
That's right.
Well, not one, but two 6.3 magnitude earthquakes rocked the western part of Afghanistan. Now, the initial death toll stands at 300, but thousands more have been injured. Now, following the earthquakes was an aftershock measuring 5.5, and people poured into the streets seeking safety as the earth trembled below their feet. Now, in 2022, a massive earthquake killed more than 1,000 people.
Putin is convinced that Ukraine is only holding on because the Western aid, and says that if that stops, the Russian president is confident Ukraine's army would buckle in just 1 week. And now the United States is officially not allowed to send any more aid for the next 40 days. But Biden and European allies say that despite the halt of support from the U.S., nothing will change for the Ukrainian defenses.
But President Zelensky will be nervous. However, the move is making another nation nervous on the other side of the world, and that's Taiwan. Now, politics in the U.S. government are blocking the funds right now, and this is a big concern to countries who rely on U.S. support. So now Taiwan is wondering if they are going to be able to count on their American ally if China were to invade.
Well, President Joe Biden is pushing the United States Senate and House of Representatives to back continued support of Ukraine in their time of need, telling reporters, quote, "It doesn't worry me, but I know there are a majority of members of the House of Representatives, both parties, who have said that they support funding Ukraine," end quote. The president later gave a speech on the importance of continuing to fund America's allies.
Well, the president is also looking at grant money from the State Department. Now, political reports saying, quote, to send additional military aid to Ukraine as Congress continues to battle over weapons funding, according to two U.S. officials with knowledge of the discussion.
CNN reports, quote, senior Biden administration officials privately believe only weeks remain before a lack of additional Ukraine funding starts to become a serious battlefield concern, a scenario that they are trying to avoid with public warnings and a major speech from President Joe Biden himself.
Well, Taiwan has been watching all this unfold from the Pacific Coast region with big concerns over a similar fate could befall them. Now, Taiwanese Foreign Minister Joseph Wu spoke with First Post saying, quote, when the war started, many people, just like the people here in Taiwan, are looking at the war taking place in front of them. They are watching the videos of the war destruction and atrocities of this democracy called Ukraine. Then they look around and say, where is the next possible target of tyranny, expansionism?
Well, Wu continues, quote, then they realize that Taiwan might be the next one, and that they look at the Chinese track record of threatening Taiwan, end quote. Well, while Taiwan wants to maintain its autonomy, China does not see it that way and claims it is part of the republic, but does not have a firm hold on the island yet. And this has been an ongoing battle, so to speak, for a very long time, even to the point where Taiwan or China was threatening the United States because they were being more involved with Taiwan, building those relations.
Right. Well, President Vladimir Putin says that Russia is important to, quote, build a new world, and that would keep the United States from gaining global hegemony. Now, during his annual speech at a Russian discussion club, President Putin claimed that Russia did not invade Ukraine, but was merely attempting to prevent a Western-dominated world. Now, he accused Europe of putting up a modern-day Iron Curtain and warned that sanctions against Moscow were hurting all of Europe's economy. Now, the final announcement that the Russian president made was that his government could resume nuclear testing, which has been silent for nearly 3 decades.
Well, take a look at this next video on that shows Putin's speech in Sochi. He was there for a while there addressing many people regarding a nuclear strike from others and Russia.
Хочу заверить всех,
I want to assure everyone that at the moment the response from Russia to a nuclear strike in its territory is absolutely unacceptable for any potential aggressor. Because from the moment the enemy missile launch is detected, no matter where it comes from any point of the world's oceans or from any territory, in a retaliatory counterstrike, so many hundreds of our missiles will appear in the air and that not a single enemy will have a chance of survival in several directions at once.
Katan, President Putin very clearly reiterating the fact that Russia is a nuclear power and they're not afraid to use those nuclear weapons.
Right.
Well, continuing with Russia news regarding its latest weapons revelation, Russia has tested a new nuclear-powered missile, one that's boasted to be able to reach targets in the United States. Now, Russia's ICBM named Burevestnik, surnamed Skyfall by NATO, has been wrought with test failures during its development. But it was introduced in 2018 and is ground launched. It can stay in the air longer than most missiles because it's powered by nuclear power.
And that's something it's kind of new on the market because most of those fueled missiles, well, they kind of have a lifespan, whereas nuclear-powered missiles, they can kind of go on and on and on. While Putin hasn't acknowledged that a test took place, he did say that one, quote-unquote, could have taken place. The U.S. speculates, seeing the movement of military vehicles in the Arctic, that a test might have taken place. Now, this missile is concerning to the United States because it's expected to have a range of up to 20,000 kilometers. Now, that's over 12,000 miles, which means it could be placed anywhere in Russia and could strike targets within the United States.
Well, it also is low flying at an altitude of 50 to 100 meters, which makes it hard to detect by air defense radar. Now, Russia says that this missile will make anyone who thinks to use a nuclear weapon against Russia think twice. Now, Putin has also said that Russia has almost completed their work on its Sarmat ICBM system, another key element of its development of new nuclear weapons. And Katan, we mentioned before that Russia is very advanced in their new missile systems. They came out with the hypersonics before the United States did. As the United States was still kind of meddling in other people's business, Russia was silently developing their weapons, and now they've come out with these missiles that we've also said the U.S. is kind of fearful that they don't have a way to defend against them.
Right. Hard to fight what you can't see. Well, although Russia hasn't conducted a nuclear test, as we mentioned before, in over 30 years, Putin has not ruled out the possibility of new nuclear tests. Russia has said that although it signed and ratified the 1996 Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, the same one that the United States signed but did not ratify, therefore it could revoke its ratification, being Russia, and begin testing once again. While in Sochi, President Putin also put out a nuclear warning, that any country that would launch a nuclear attack against Russia would see hundreds of nuclear missiles being launched in their direction and not one enemy would survive, he said.
Tough words. Well, let's take a closer look at the hype over Russia's new cruise missile and Putin's willingness to go to extremes to make his point that Moscow will use nuclear weapons if necessary, if Russia is threatened. Take a look.
All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. Now, Russia's invasion of Ukraine at this moment is at a pretty critical stage. Now, Russia has the world's biggest nuclear arsenal, and its head, Vladimir Putin, at times can be unpredictable. So when Vladimir Putin talks about a potential nuclear war, then this is something that should raise concerns around the world. Now, the Russian president recently announced that the country's latest laurel, where he said Russia has successfully carried out a test of a new generation nuclear-powered cruise missile. And during this announcement, he also went on to state that there is no other nation in the world which has a nuclear weapon like this. Listen to what the Russian president had to say.
Because from the moment the missile launch is detected, no matter where it comes from, any point of the world's oceans or from any territory, in a retaliatory counterstrike, so many hundreds of our missiles will appear in the air that not a single enemy will have a chance of survival in several directions at once.
The experimental weapon is known as Burevestnik. The West, that is the NATO-led nations, including the United States, they describe this weapon as Skyfall. The weapon has faced many trial failures over the past years, and it was reportedly involved in an accident leading to multiple fatalities as well. The Burevestnik missile was first mentioned by Vladimir Putin back in 2018. It's a ground-launched, low-flying cruise missile that is capable of carrying a nuclear warhead. But that's not where the actual technology lies. It's not just a missile that can carry a nuclear warhead. This is a missile that uses atomic energy for its propulsion, which means technically or theoretically, this missile can have a no-limit range. It can cover much more distance than pretty much any other missile that is known in existence. But why is this a concern of worry? Well, let's look at what Russia's nuclear doctrine in fact states. Russia's nuclear doctrine states that Russia will only use a nuclear weapon under one condition: if another state were to provoke an attack with a weapon of mass destruction. But the decree stating this ends with a caveat. It goes on to state that nuclear weapons will be used in case of aggression against the Russian Federation with the use of conventional weapons when the very existence of the Russian state is under threat. This is the condition under which Russia, as part of its nuclear doctrine, will use a nuclear weapon. Now, what makes this dangerous is a statement that Vladimir Putin has made after he invaded Ukraine. He said, and I quote him here, "For our country, it's a matter of life and death, a matter of our historical future as a nation. It is not only a very real threat to our interests, but also to the very existence of the Russian state and to Russia's sovereignty." But at the tactical level, however, the situation is completely different. There is a doctrine in place of no first use. But because Russia's wording and intentions at this moment are pretty difficult to gauge, these kinds of statements, of course, call for a lot of concerns around the world. Now, the threat of a nuclear weapon has surfaced multiple times in the last 18-odd months of the war. The problem is that just because Putin has not pressed the red button in the past, that does not mean that he will not press it in the future. But what makes all of this extremely concerning is that because as the war continues to drag on, it has made both parties much more desperate in trying to achieve a victory. And that is what makes these kind of statements extremely concerning.
Well, you know, they talk about this being like the next generation of nuclear weaponry. Sadly, at the pace we're going, it's also going to be, well, I guess it's not a sad thing. It's a great thing that it's going to be the last generation of nuclear weapons, because even like Russia said many times, or President Putin said many times in previous speeches, there will be no winners with an all-out nuclear war because it is mutually assured destruction.
Right, and that is the consensus of anyone that knows how powerful these nuclear weapons are. There's not going to be another war fought after this one if nuclear weapons are used.
Sticks and stones, they said. The next war will be fought, if any, with sticks and stones. Well, if you'd like to know more about the current prophecy, time of prophecy that we're in, and what's yet to come, and how you can prepare yourself and your family to escape, contact the House of Yahweh. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you'd like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. For any international calls, you can call the number that's on your screen now. And again, don't forget to go to the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com and the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com. Excellent study tools for scriptural questions. Type in the words, the key searches, and you'll pull up pages and pages of information guaranteed to occupy your time in a very beneficial way.
Well, don't go anywhere, because up next is another classic message by Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.